The hunt begins. The jungle was silent. Too silent. Zira crouched on a thick tree branch, her golden eyes scanning the dense forest below. She had been following the human for days, tracking his every move, studying his patterns. He was fast, clever, and far too skilled for an ordinary human, but no one could escape her hunt. Zira was a Sci-fi Huntress, trained from birth to track and eliminate targets. Her sleek, black exosuit blended perfectly with the dark shadows of the trees. Her helmet displayed a holographic map, showing the faint heat signature of her prey. Ethan Carter. Ethan was an escaped fugitive. The humans called him a super soldier, a failed experiment from their secret labs. Zira's mission was clear: capture or kill. But the hunt had not gone as planned. She had expected an easy chase. Instead, Ethan had led her through harsh terrain, set false trails, and even doubled back to confuse her. He was not running in fear. He was leading her somewhere. And Zira hated that. She tapped a button on her wrist. The scanner beeped softly, showing Ethan's trail heading toward a large rock formation covered in vines. A cave. Zira narrowed her eyes. A perfect place for an ambush. She leaped down silently, landing without a sound. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something unnatural. The jungle had many dangers, but right now, Ethan was the biggest one. She moved forward carefully, her blaster ready. The footprints in the dirt were fresh. Ethan had entered the cave not long ago. Zira hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. The cave was cold and dark. Zira activated her night vision, turning the blackness into shades of green. The walls were damp, and water dripped from the ceiling. No sign of Ethan. She moved deeper, her every step slow and careful. The silence pressed around her like a heavy blanket. Something was wrong. Then, a soft click. Zira's instincts screamed trap. She jumped back just as the ground beneath her collapsed. A hidden pitfall, filled with sharp spikes, appeared where she had been standing a second ago. A voice echoed from the shadows. "You're good," Ethan said, "but I'm better." Zira spun around, aiming her blaster at the sound. But Ethan wasn't there. He was using the cave's acoustics to confuse her. "You think you're hunting me?" Ethan's voice was calm, almost amused. "You're in my world now." Zira clenched her jaw. She was the best huntress in the Sci-fi Empire. She wouldn't be outplayed by a human. She activated her infrared scanner. It would detect Ethan's body heat, no matter how well he hid. But the screen flickered strangely. A signal jam. Zira's stomach tightened. Ethan had hacked her systems. A sudden movement. She turned just in time to dodge a blade flying toward her face. It missed by inches, embedding into the rock wall. A distraction. Too late. Ethan struck from behind. Zira barely blocked his attack, raising her arm as Ethan's knife clashed against her armored gauntlet. His strength was unnatural, enhanced by whatever experiments the humans had done to him. She countered with a swift kick, but Ethan was fast. He rolled back, disappearing into the darkness again. "Not bad," he called. "Most bounty hunters don't last this long." Zira steadied her breath. He was playing with her, testing her. He was not afraid. She had underestimated him. That mistake would not happen again. Zira switched tactics. She closed her eyes, tuning out distractions. She let her other senses take control, listening for the slightest movement, feeling the air shift. A breath. A whisper of fabric. There. She spun and fired. The cave lit up as the energy blast shot forward, but Ethan was already gone. Instead, the blast hit something else. The ceiling. The explosion sent shockwaves through the cave. Rocks tumbled down, blocking the exit. The air filled with dust. Zira coughed, her vision blurred. When the dust settled, she saw Ethan standing on the other side of the cave, just beyond the fallen rocks. He smiled. "Looks like you're trapped," he said. Then he was gone. Zira clenched her fists. This was not over. The hunter had just become the hunted. The chase reverses. A deep, unnatural silence filled the cave. Dust from the collapsed ceiling still hung in the air, settling slowly like the quiet before a storm. Zara stood motionless, her golden eyes locked onto the blocked entrance. Ethan had done this on purpose. Not to kill her. To trap her. Zara's jaw clenched. She was no ordinary bounty hunter. She had tracked and captured the deadliest criminals across the galaxy. But now, she was the prey. A soft chuckle echoed through the cave. Not what you expected, huh? Ethan's voice teased from somewhere in the darkness. Zara's grip on her blaster tightened. She activated her visor's thermal scan, searching for his heat signature. But the screen flickered, distorted. A signal disruptor. Ethan was prepared for her technology. He wasn't running anymore. He was leading her deeper into the unknown. She took a slow step forward. "I don't care how smart you think you are," Zara said, her voice steady. "I will find you." Silence. Then, without warning, a bright flash. Zara's visor flared white as a sudden light explosion filled the cave. A flash grenade. She cursed, stumbling back, her vision blurred. Her enhanced reflexes saved her, just barely. She dodged a knife slicing through the air, feeling the sharp edge graze her shoulder armor. Then he was gone again. Zara blinked rapidly, her sight returning in shades of red and black. Ethan was faster than she had calculated. His movements were deliberate, his traps well planned. She wasn't hunting an ordinary human. She was hunting something far worse. Zara's mind raced. Think. Adapt. Hunt. Ethan wanted to disorient her, control the battlefield. But she wasn't just a soldier, she was a Silari predator. She switched to manual tracking. No more relying on tech. She crouched, pressing her fingers against the dirt. Light footprints. Fresh, leading further in. She followed, her movements silent as a shadow. The deeper she went, the colder it became. The cave wasn't just a hiding place. It was a maze. She heard it before she saw it. A distant, mechanical click. Another trap. Zara leaped to the side as a section of the cave floor collapsed into darkness. Below, jagged spikes glistened in the dim light. If she had been 1 second slower. She exhaled slowly. Ethan was testing her. Good. She smiled to herself. Let the game begin. The path twisted ahead, opening into a massive underground chamber. Strange bioluminescent plants clung to the walls, casting an eerie green glow. And standing at the center, waiting for her, was Ethan. He had no gun, no armor, just a calm expression, like this was his home. "You're persistent," he said, tilting his head. Most bounty hunters would have turned back by now. Zara kept her blaster raised. "Most bounty hunters aren't me." Ethan smirked. "Fair point." He took a slow step forward. Zara tensed, ready to fire. But then, a low growl rumbled from the shadows. Zara's eyes flicked to the side. Something was watching them. A second growl, then another. She recognized the sound instantly. Not human, not friendly. Ethan sighed. "You really should have turned back." From the darkness, something huge began to move. And for the first time in the hunt, Zara wasn't sure who the real enemy was. The forgotten predator. A deep, guttural growl filled the cavern, vibrating through the stone walls like the breath of something ancient, something hungry. Zara didn't move. Neither did Ethan. For the first time in this deadly game, the two hunters weren't looking at each other. They were looking at something far worse. From the shadows, two glowing red eyes blinked open. Then another, and another. Zara's pulse quickened. She recognized the creature immediately. A Vorthak. A nightmare from Silari legends. A creature designed by evolution to hunt the hunters. It had been watching them. Waiting. Ethan let out a slow breath. Took it long enough to show itself. Zara's gaze snapped at him. "You knew it was here." He didn't answer. Instead, He slowly reached for the blade at his belt. The Vorthak stepped forward. 8 limbs, razor-sharp mandibles, a thick, armored hide that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. It was the perfect ambush predator, blending into the cave's natural glow. And now it was done waiting. The creature lunged. Zira reacted first. She fired 2 quick shots, the plasma bolts striking its thick hide. But they barely left a mark. Ethan was already moving. He rolled to the side, slicing at one of its legs with his blade. The Vorthak screeched, but it didn't slow down. Zira aimed for its eyes. A direct hit would blind it. She squeezed the trigger. Too late. The Vorthak whipped its tail with brutal force, sending Zira flying backward. She slammed against the cave wall, her vision flashing white. Pain exploded through her ribs. She barely had time to recover before Ethan grabbed her arm and dragged her to cover. "Not the best time for a nap," he muttered. Zira pushed him off, glaring. "I don't need your help." Ethan smirked. "That's cute. Now, do you actually have a plan? Or do we just die together?" Zira exhaled sharply, forcing herself to focus. The Vorthak was circling now, studying them like prey. They had seconds before it attacked again. She scanned the cave. The walls were lined with sharp stalactites, unstable formations just waiting to collapse. A trap. Zira's mind worked fast. If she could lure the Vorthak beneath those spikes. She turned to Ethan. "I have a plan." He raised an eyebrow. "That makes one of us." Zira smirked. "Try to keep up." She leaped out of cover, firing another shot to get the Vorthak's attention. It shrieked in rage, its massive body twisting to face her. Ethan cursed under his breath but followed, sprinting toward the other side of the chamber. The Vorthak charged after them. Zira led it exactly where she wanted, beneath the stalactites. Now came the hard part. She turned, dropping to one knee, aiming directly above the creature. One shot. That's all she needed. She took a slow breath, fired. The plasma bolt struck the weakest point of the ceiling. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, the cavern roared as the stalactites came crashing down. The Vorthak screeched, twisting too late to escape. The jagged spikes impaled its body, piercing through its armor. Zira and Ethan barely rolled out of the way as dust and rock exploded around them. When the air cleared, the Vorthak lay still, dead. Ethan let out a slow, impressed whistle. Well, that worked. Zira stood, brushing the dust from her armor. Of course it worked. Ethan shook his head. You Xelari are really something else. Zira narrowed her eyes. You knew that thing was here. You used me to help kill it. Ethan shrugged. You used me too. Fair trade. Zira didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. But now there was a new problem. If a Vorthak was here, that meant this planet was far more dangerous than she thought. And for the first time since the hunt began, she wasn't sure if she wanted to finish it. The deadly alliance. Zira wiped the blood from her lip, tasting the metallic tang of battle. The Vorthak was dead, but the fight had left its mark. Her body ached, her breathing was sharp and measured. And Ethan was smiling. She hated that. You enjoyed that, she muttered, flexing her bruised wrist. Ethan shrugged, wiping his blade clean. Not often I get to fight something meaner than you. Zira glared at him, but she couldn't deny the truth. They had needed each other to survive. A deep rumble shook the cave walls. Dust trickled from the ceiling, and Zira's instincts flared. That was not an ordinary aftershock. Move, she snapped. Ethan didn't ask questions. They sprinted toward a narrow tunnel as the ground trembled beneath them. Behind them, the cavern collapsed entirely, burying the Vorthak's corpse under tons of rock. They barely made it into the next chamber before the entrance caved in behind them. A death trap, sealed. Ethan exhaled sharply. I'm starting to think this planet doesn't like us. Zira didn't respond. She was already scanning the new area. The chamber was different, smoother, artificial. Not natural. Zira touched the wall. Metal. Her eyes flickered. This wasn't made by nature. Ethan frowned, stepping forward. His fingers traced strange alien markings carved into the surface. "This place is old," he murmured. "Older than me. Older than your people, maybe." Zira stiffened. Older than her people. The Exilari Empire had mapped thousands of planets, uncovered lost civilizations. But this was something else. Then she saw the bodies. Lined along the walls, half buried under dust, were humanoid skeletons. Some were human. Others were not. Zira crouched beside one, brushing away the years of dirt. The armor was unfamiliar, but the insignia on the chest plate wasn't. Her blood ran cold. Silari script. Ethan watched her carefully. "You recognize it?" Zira didn't answer. She stood up, gripping her blaster. This changed everything. This mission was no longer about Ethan. This planet held secrets her people had never spoken of. And that meant they had lied to her. Ethan watched Zira closely. She had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that meant something big had just changed in her head. He wasn't sure if that was good or bad for him. Then, a sound. Not from the cave. From the shadows. Ethan reacted first, grabbing Zira's arm and pulling her down just as a plasma bolt shot past where her head had been. Zira rolled into position, blaster up, scanning the darkness. Footsteps. Metallic. Not human. And then they saw them. Figures emerging from the tunnels, tall, armored, and carrying advanced weapons. Their faces were hidden behind sleek helmets, their movements precise. Zira knew them instantly. Silari hunters. Her people. But they weren't here to help. She could see it in their stance, their weapons aimed at her and Ethan alike. Ethan sighed. "I'm guessing you don't know them." Zira's jaw tightened. "I know them." A cold voice echoed from the leader's helmet. "Zira of the Xilari. Step away from the human." Zira didn't move. Because now, she understood. She hadn't been sent here to hunt Ethan. She had been sent here to die with him. The truth revealed. Zira's hand stayed firm on her blaster, but her mind raced. She recognized the insignia on their armor, the Black Talon unit. Silari assassins. Not trackers. Not soldiers. Executioners. Her mission had been a lie. Ethan was never the real target. She was. Ethan exhaled sharply beside her. "I'm guessing these aren't your friends." The leader of the unit, a towering figure in obsidian armor, stepped forward. His voice was distorted by the helmet's modulator, but she knew him. "Commander Ralvik, you were never meant to leave this planet." "Zira," Ralvik said, his tone almost amused. "You've served the Empire well, but you outlived your purpose." Zira didn't lower her weapon. "My purpose." Ralvik tilted his head slightly. "You were useful, a tool, but you found things you weren't meant to see." His gaze flickered to the ancient markings on the walls. "We can't allow that." Zira felt a cold wave rush through her. The Empire knew about this place, about the lost civilization buried beneath this jungle, and they wanted it erased. Her mission wasn't about Ethan. It was about making sure no one left this planet alive. Ethan's stance shifted. He wasn't smiling anymore. He had seen enough betrayals to recognize one when it happened. "So let me guess," he said, his voice dry. "Your empire doesn't like loose ends." Ralvik ignored him. His visor stayed locked on Zira. "This is your last chance," he said. "Stand down, hand over the human." Zira knew what that meant. Even if she complied, they would kill her anyway. She had been a fool to think loyalty mattered. She had spent years hunting for the Empire, believing in its order, its control. But she was never a warrior to them. She was just another mission. And now she was the target. Something inside her snapped. She fired first. The cavern exploded into chaos. Zira's plasma bolt struck one of the soldiers, sending him crashing back. Before the others could react, Ethan grabbed a fallen rifle and opened fire. Ralvik barely flinched. Kill them. The assassins moved fast. Too fast. Zira spun, dodging a blade meant for her throat. She slammed her elbow into the attacker's helmet, twisting the blaster from his grip and firing point blank into his chest. Ethan, meanwhile, fought with brutal efficiency. His stolen rifle hissed as he fired controlled bursts, never wasting a shot. He ducked, rolled, and used the environment like a seasoned predator. But the Black Talon unit wasn't just any squad. They were designed to kill warriors like Zira. Two of them rushed her at once. One swung a plasma blade. She barely blocked it with her forearm guard. The second aimed a stun baton for her ribs. She had seconds to react. She grabbed the first assassin's wrist, twisted hard, a sickening crack, and used his body to block the baton strike. Then, with ruthless precision, she drove her blaster under his helmet and pulled the trigger. One down. But the fight was far from over. Ethan ducked behind a pillar as energy bolts shredded the stone around him. "This is getting fun," he muttered. Zira slid next to him, breathing hard. "Define fun." Ethan smirked. "I'd say 5 against 2 is bad odds, but I like a challenge." Zira's eyes flickered toward Ralvik, who stood untouched, watching, waiting. She exhaled sharply. "We can't win this fight." Ethan arched an eyebrow. "That's not the inspiring speech I was hoping for." Zira didn't answer. She was already calculating. The ancient ruins held secrets. The walls pulsed with energy, the markings humming softly. This place wasn't just a burial site. It was something else, something powerful. She made a decision, a reckless one. "We don't fight," she said. "We run." Ethan blinked. "Excuse me." She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the tunnels. "Move." Ethan hesitated for only half a second before following. Behind them, Ralvik's voice rang out. "Don't let them escape." The assassins gave chase, and Zira prayed that whatever secrets this place held wouldn't kill them first. The final betrayal. The tunnels twisted like a serpent's spine, their walls pulsing with a faint, eerie glow. Zira ran without hesitation, her boots barely making a sound on the ancient stone floor. Behind her, Ethan followed, his breath steady despite the chaos. And behind them, death followed swiftly. The assassins were relentless, their footsteps like a drumbeat of inevitability. Plasma bolts screamed past Zira's head, illuminating the dark corridor with flashes of deadly light. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She knew what was coming. She had seen it before. 5 minutes earlier. Ralvik hadn't moved during the battle. He stood, still and unshaken, watching his soldiers fall one by one. Zira had thought it was arrogance. She was wrong. It was confidence, because he knew something she didn't. And then he spoke. "You think you're running, Zira," he said, his voice almost bored. "But you're exactly where we want you." She didn't understand, until she saw the signal beacon on his wrist. A pulse of energy rippled through the air. Then the walls began to move. Zira's heart slammed against her ribs. The ruins were waking up. Ethan had barely registered what was happening when the first holographic symbols flared to life on the ancient walls. They weren't just ruins. They were a weapon, a hidden command station, and Ralvik had just activated it. Present. Zira slid into a narrow passageway, yanking Ethan with her just as an energy surge shot through the tunnel. The blast missed them by inches, striking the walls instead, but instead of destroying them, the energy absorbed into the stone. Ethan grimaced. "That's not normal." Zira didn't respond. She was too busy thinking. Ralvik's words rang in her mind. "You're exactly where we want you." She hadn't just been led into a trap. She had been funneled here. Ethan noticed the flicker in her expression. "What is it?" She exhaled. "They don't want to kill us." Ethan frowned. "Could have fooled me." "No," Zira said. "If they wanted us dead, they would have bombed the whole structure from orbit." She turned to him. "They need us alive." Ethan's gaze darkened. Why? Zura's fingers brushed against the ancient carvings, still pulsing faintly. Her people had known about this place. And they had lied. This wasn't just a tomb. It was a control center, a place built by something far older than the Tsilari Empire. And now the Empire wanted to claim it. Ethan looked at her, reading her silence. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was steady. They sent you here to die. Zura nodded. They sent me here to die too. She nodded again. Ethan let out a slow, bitter laugh. Great. Love working with honest employers. Zura's jaw clenched. They didn't expect us to survive this long. Ethan's grip tightened around his rifle. So what now? A new voice cut through the air. You surrender. Zura and Ethan spun around to find Ralvik standing at the end of the tunnel. Unarmed, unshaken. Behind him, his remaining soldiers aimed their weapons, but they weren't firing, because they didn't need to. Ralvik stepped forward. This place is not yours to take, he said. Not his. His visor tilted toward Ethan. Not ours. Zura's stomach twisted. They weren't here to erase history. They were here to awaken it. Ralvik's voice was almost gentle. We are standing inside a war machine, Zyra. One that could wipe out entire civilizations. Do you understand? Her breath slowed. Ethan's fingers twitched near his weapon. You want to activate it. Ralvik nodded. And you need us to do it. Another nod. Zura knew the answer before she even asked. Why us? Ralvik looked at her. Because the machine only responds to those who are worthy. Ethan let out a sharp breath. And what does worthy mean? Ralvik's answer was simple. Survival. The machine had tested them. The jungle. The creatures. The assassins. The betrayals. And they were still standing. Ethan glanced at Zura. For the first time since the hunt began, they weren't enemies. They were something else. Ralvik extended his hand. Choose, Zyra, he said. Unlock the machine and take your place, or die here, forgotten. Silence. Then Zyra raised her blaster and shot the commander in the head. Ralvik never saw it coming. His body collapsed instantly, his soldiers stunned. Ethan didn't hesitate. He fired next. Two of the assassins fell before the others could react. Zura grabbed Ethan's arm. Run. They sprinted deeper into the ruins. Behind them, alarms blared. Soldiers shouted. Ethan looked at Zura as they ran. Okay, so I take it we're not unlocking the machine. Zura didn't answer, because she wasn't sure. Some secrets were never meant to be found. And some powers were never meant to be controlled. The ultimate choice. The ruins trembled as alarms blared through the tunnels, their deafening echoes bouncing off ancient walls. Dust rained down from the ceiling, caught in eerie blue light emanating from the strange symbols along the chamber's edges. Zura didn't stop running. Neither did Ethan. Behind them, Ralvik's soldiers recovered fast, too fast. Shouts rang out, followed by the sharp hiss of plasma rounds slicing through the air. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. Ethan skidded to a halt as they burst into a massive open chamber. Zura nearly slammed into him. What the hell? Ethan started, but the words died in his throat. They were standing inside the heart of the ruins. And it was awake. Massive pillars lined the room, each pulsing with light. Not artificial, not mechanical, but something older, something alive. The walls stretched impossibly high, curving into an enormous dome where the symbols carved into the stone shifted, changing like a living language. And at the very center of the chamber stood a monolithic structure. A throne. Or a control seat. Or maybe both. Zura felt something in her chest tighten. She had seen battlefields, cities, warships. But this place. This was beyond war. This was power itself. Ethan's voice was low. Tell me I'm not crazy. Zura exhaled slowly. I can't. A voice interrupted them. You were never supposed to see this. Zara and Ethan turned sharply. Ralvik stood at the entrance, blood dripping down his armor. His helmet was gone, revealing sharp, ciliary features and cold, unreadable eyes. His soldiers were behind him, their weapons raised. But they weren't shooting, because they didn't need to. Ralvik was smiling. "You should have listened," he said, stepping forward. "You think you can run from this?" He gestured to the towering structure. "From what this place is." Ethan gritted his teeth. "I don't even know what this place is." Ralvik's smile didn't falter. "Then let me explain." The symbols on the walls pulsed again, reacting to their presence. "This is not a ruin," Ralvik said. "It is a test." Zara's pulse quickened. "A test for what?" Ralvik's eyes locked onto hers. "For a ruler." The silence stretched, thick with something heavier than fear. Zara didn't move. Ethan barely breathed. Ralvik continued. "The Auxiliary believed we were the first ones here. We weren't." His fingers traced a shifting symbol on the wall. "This place was built by something older, stronger, a race that disappeared long before our empires were even born." He turned to Zara. "And now it waits for a successor." Zara felt the weight of his words like a blade against her throat. Ethan frowned. "And you think, what? That it's waiting for you?" Ralvik chuckled. "Not me." He tilted his head slightly. "Her." The chamber dimmed. The air turned heavy. Zara felt something pulling. The throne pulsed, calling. She had spent her entire life as a hunter, a soldier, a servant to an empire that had just tried to erase her. And yet here, the ruins recognized her. She could feel it beneath her skin, a whispering presence, old as the stars. Ralvik saw it too. His smile widened. "You were never meant to be just a killer, Zara." Zara's hands curled into fists. This was why they sent her here. Not to retrieve Ethan, not to kill him, but because the Empire knew. They knew what she might become, and they were afraid. Ethan took a step toward her. His voice was softer now. "You don't have to listen to him." Zara didn't answer. She was still staring at the throne. She could feel it. Power. Ancient, immeasurable power. If she sat upon that seat, the Auxiliary Empire would bow before her. The human colonies would fear her. The galaxy itself would bend to her will. Her entire life, she had been a weapon. Now, she had the chance to be something more. Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. "Zara." She turned toward him. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't afraid. He just looked at her, like she was still her. Not a queen, not a conqueror, not a god. Just Zara. And that was what made the choice so impossibly hard. Ralvik stepped forward, extending his hand. "Take your place." Ethan held out his hand too. "No," he said. "Walk away." For the first time in her life, Zara had no orders, no mission, just a choice. Option 1. Zara takes the throne. She walks forward. Ralvik watches, triumphant. She sits. The ruins come alive. A storm ignites in her mind, visions of conquest, of destruction, of absolute power. She looks at Ethan one last time. And then the chamber doors slam shut behind him. Darkness swallows the world. Option 2. Zara refuses. She steps back. Ralvik's smile falters. "You fool." Zara lifts her blaster. "I'm done being a puppet." She fires. The ruins shake. The power collapses. And then, with a roar, the entire temple begins to fall. She grabs Ethan's hand. And together, they run.